Bonjour tout le monde. Today we're in for a real treat. We're at Chateau Malmaison, just on the outskirts of Paris. This was the home of the Empress Josephine and Napoleon, and it's where Redouté came to paint his famous rose pictures.
On a donc des roses galliques.
We'll be taking a tour of the garden and chateau with head gardener Gilles Becker. We'll meet the German artist Thilo Westermann, whose incredible dot pictures are attracting the attention of art buyers around the world.
How many dots are in this picture?
You count. I do not know.
And we'll get close up to some Redouté originals. Josephine and Napoleon bought Malmaison in 1799. He was fighting in Egypt. She spent a fortune doing it up, and another building an incredible collection of plants.
Joséphine avait trois serres.
Josephine had 3 warm houses. This is the biggest. There are just the walls left now. But it wasn't just plants she was obsessed about.
Elle collectionnait tout, Joséphine.
Josephine collected everything. Jewellery, paintings, sculptures, even animals.
Par exemple, ici, il y avait des kangourous.
For example, there were kangaroos, dwarf emus, ostriches, zebras. But her favourite was an orangutan she called Rose. It ate with her at the table, and she even let it sleep in the marital bed, to Napoleon's annoyance. But let's go outside and look at the garden. The garden's a fraction of the size it once was, but still there's plenty to enjoy.
Napoleon was a bit of a gardener himself, and he knew the importance of shade for a marching army. So perhaps it was his idea, after the Battle of Marengo in 1800, to plant this amazing cedar of Lebanon tree. Obviously, it's grown a huge amount since then. It's been here 200 years. And I just imagine Josephine walking through the garden today with us on this tour and looking up at this and whether she'd recognise it. It is absolutely magnificent, and I'm sure it would give her enormous pleasure to see it again.
I bet this would too. Josephine was the first person in Europe to successfully breed Australian black swans in captivity, and they still have one today.
Donc les rosiers anciens que
The roses Josephine would have known are not in the beds on this side of the house. Gilles has planted repeat flowering modern roses.
lianes qui courent comme ça sur les
A lovely mix of shrubs and climbers on chains. I'm sure Josephine would have been planting them herself if she was planning this garden today. There are perhaps 3,000 to 4,000 roses in this garden, 450 different varieties, and Gilles clearly likes them. But his favourite bit is just round the corner.
Vous voyez, ça c'est de la sauge sauvage, ça c'est de l'orchidée.
It's a wild meadow full of salvia, orchids, scabious and pimpernels. He says he adores it.
Ça c'est une autre orchidée, Orchis bouc. Regardez tous les insectes qui se trouvent dessus. Et alors ça, moi j'adore. Ici, c'est important. Ailleurs, c'est important aussi, mais on ne s'en rend pas compte.
Gilles says he tries to keep the spirit of Josephine alive in this garden, and you can still see her fingerprints on the design.
Déjà, c'est un jardin féminin. Moi, j'ai toujours été dans des jardins droits.
He says it's a feminine garden, the garden of an empress, soft, gentle lines, not the angular, almost brutal designs of kings trying to impress and awe.
Vraiment.
We've reached the other side of the house and the garden of old roses. Josephine may have had 200 varieties and in her day kept them all in pots. There are some rather special old roses here.
This is a rose that Josephine would have recognised. It's Slater's Crimson China. It's a Chinese rose that arrived in France at about 1792 via England. And it's the most important rose in history, perhaps. It's the first truly crimson rose to arrive in Europe. And so it's in the bloodlines of all red roses that we have today, probably. In China, they call it red dragon with a white pearl in its mouth. And if you look at its centre, past these red petals, you see that lovely white pearl. Amazing, eh?
The turn of the 19th century was an incredibly exciting time for gardeners, as all sorts of new plants were arriving from China. Roses in particular took a leap forward. Before this, there was only one repeat flowering rose in Europe. Now we had new colours, new scents, and several repeat flowering varieties. Josephine wanted them all. Even though Britain was at war with France, the government gave permission for the naval blockade to be lifted to allow roses to be shipped over to her. And there to paint them was this man, Pierre-Joseph Redouté. She made him flower painter to the Empress.
Redouté lived here on the grounds of Josephine and illustrated them one by one by one. And he really was one of the most prolific, but also one of the best to really translate into art all these little details. I just stand here in awe. I mean, it's mostly, you know them from the books, of course, or from reproduction, on T-shirts, on umbrellas, on porcelain. But when you see the original, it's really something different, I would say. It has this specific aura to it.
In 2011, German artist Thilo Westermann came across this oil painting attributed to Redouté. That same year, he read about a new David Austin rose.
The rose has been given the name Redouté. And this gave me an idea, why don't I just work with a composition here and create my own version of it, make it contemporary, so to say, by presenting the rose Redouté in the composition.
He used his very own reverse glass painting technique to create this new work of art.
The process starts with a blank sheet of glass. It's fully transparent, and I cover it with a very thin layer of black paint. And from this black paint, I etch little dots with an etching needle. And one by one, dot by dot, the image grows into a motif, like you can see here, 3 peonies in a Japanese vase.
I'm going to have to put my reading glasses on, I think.
Well, I'm doing it since over 20 years now, almost 25 years, I guess.
It's astonishing.
So it's a process. Once the image is created, I have the dots work covered with a final layer of white paint to protect it from the bag, and then I hang it on the wall. So this is the this is why you look through the glass and see the motif on the back side, but you also see your own reflection on the surface of the glass.
So when I'm looking at that picture and my reflection is in the picture, that's not a problem. That's part of the artwork, the engagement with the picture.
Exactly. It's a problem for the people taking pictures in the exhibitions. But exactly that is what I want. It makes people stop. Once I finished the dots work, I have it scanned and printed on the reverse side on a sheet of glass again, so you have the same aesthetics, the same reflections, but only the dots are 6 times as big. The idea is, because when you have a small painting somewhere, everyone goes close to discover what's on it. But when you go really close to the big one, you lose the idea of the whole. So it's like the universe of dots opens up, and this is really what's interesting for me as an artist. You can see the building blocks of the reverse glass painting.
How many dots are in this picture?
You count. I do not know. I do not know.
There must be a million.
Probably. It's really going quickly. I mean, so I'm losing. I have no idea.
This is one of many exhibitions that take place each year at an adjacent chateau in Parkland that once belonged to Josephine. It was where she put up her guests. It shows not only Redouté, but the artists who inspired him. Josephine could take a year to pay her bills, so it's not surprising perhaps that Redouté had a side hustle, teaching women to paint. And they were good. But let's get back to the main chateau and have a peek inside.
Ici, c'est le théâtre. Rien n'est vrai.
Here it's all theatre, says Gilles. Nothing is real, only the columns. The rest is fake, painted. Josephine always struggled with money, given how much she spent, but she knew how to put on a good show and look richer than she was. At Malmaison, she created a new style, the consulate style. Here she entertained, perhaps more than Napoleon wanted. This is his study. That bookcase to the left of his chair is actually a secret door. It leads to stairs behind that Napoleon would sneak up if he heard guests coming that he didn't want to meet. Perhaps he'd hide in his bedroom that's designed to look like a general's tent on campaign. Or he'd dash out of this door into the garden to find some peace in the summer house. Theirs was a tumultuous relationship. He'd be away lots fighting. They'd each take lovers, yet their letters show a deep passion. In 1804, Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of France and Josephine as Empress. Napoleon wanted to create a new dynasty, but a dynasty needs children. When they failed to have any, he divorced her. In the interests of France, he said. Josephine retained her title of Empress and won Malmaison in the divorce settlement. Redouté carried on working in the garden painting Josephine's plants, but it was his 3 volumes of roses that established him as the Raphael of flowers. Through these, Josephine became forever associated with roses. She clearly loved them to have collected so many varieties, but her enthusiasm for natural history and science was much broader than just the rose. In fact, she saw hardly any of Redouté's rose paintings. Most were completed after her death. And here's the end of our story. In May 1814, Josephine was showing the Russian Emperor Alexander I around the beautiful gardens at Malmaison. She came down with pneumonia shortly afterwards and died. She's buried in the church of Saint-Pierre-Saint-Paul in the pretty town near the chateau. Napoleon was in exile in Elba when he learned of her death. He locked himself in his room for 2 days, refusing to see anyone. When he died a few years later, his last words were said to be, "France, the army, the head of the army, Josephine."